Thank you very much for having me. My name is Craig Strong, and I will be talking about flight levels, an exciting new approach to enterprise agility. So dive right in. We'll talk first. I'll give a brief introduction. Then we'll talk about the problem statement, what problem we're trying to solve, and what benefits can we expect to receive when we use flight levels. Um, and then we'll dive into the flight levels model. What is it? The different aspects of it, and finally give some historical background. Where did this thing come from? And then finally a couple of things where to learn more. So I'm Craig Strong. I've been in the IT world for a long time. Coach, Kanban coach, Safe coach, Scrum coach, and trainer. And you can see I do work for uh, federal agencies as well as New York City agencies, NYPD, and commercial companies. And my company is located in Times Square. And you can see here basic information about it. We've done a lot of training and a lot of interesting stuff there. So come visit us if you're in Times Square. So, what is the problem here? What is the problem statement? Well, uh, in this particular, we'll take one particular example. There was a large organization that wished to decrease their time to market. So they had, um, they were building products, they were releasing them to the market, but it was just taking too long. And their competitors were able to respond more quickly, and they were falling behind. So they said, we need to be able to move faster. So they launched a transformation effort. May look familiar. What did they do? Well, they did all the right things, all the things you're supposed to do, right? So they hired agile coaches. They had got some training. They adopted some new roles and responsibilities. What's a scrum master? Okay, I guess I got to do that. Things like this. And they established these cross-functional agile product teams so that the teams, we tried to, minimize or decrease the number of dependencies as much as possible by ensuring that each team had all of the skills that they needed right in the middle in the team. So what was the result? Did they decrease time to market? No, actually, it was an increase in time to market. So things improved for a little while, and then things immediately started getting worse. And so rather than now, of course, they expected there'll be their coaches told them that there's an initial sort of um, initial shock of adapting to new processes, but as the new processes would kick in, that the cycle time would decrease. But instead, it just kept going up. So this is not at all what was needed or what was desired. So how was this problem fixed? It was fixed by Klaus Leopold, the inventor of flight levels, using flight levels. So what can flight levels give me? Why would I learn flight levels? I already know Kanban, I already know Safe, I already know all this stuff. So what can it give you? Well, the organizational benefits are decreased time to market, improved ability to respond to threats and opportunities, really organizational agility. Sooner, safer, happier, right? One of my favorite books. And one of the key principles here is psychological safety. So, no organizational restructuring. We're not uprooting people. We're not telling them they have a different role or dramatically different responsibilities than before. And we're not having layoffs. Minimal changes to roles and responsibilities. And all of this is based on the lean principle of respect for people. So, that's one of the foundational principles of lean. And of course, as it's inspired by lean. Flight levels absolutely has that as it maintains that. So how do we do this? Well, we'll get into the details, but first, foundationally, we're understanding the flow of work throughout the entire organization, all the different levels, how they connect together, and making improvements, being able to manage bottlenecks and dependencies. And after we understand and model the flow of work throughout the organization, we may make organizational changes. Organizational changes happen all the time, but we do those last. We do those after we get an understanding of the flow of work. So that would be the last step, not the first step. So let's dive right into the flight levels model. So, what is it? Well, flight levels is a thinking model, it's not a framework. It's a thinking model that helps us understand where in an organization we have to do what in order to achieve the results that we want to achieve. And why do we say achieve the result? Why don't we just name those results? Because it's different for different organizations, and different groups. We might need to decrease cycle time. We might need to, there's a lot of different things we might need to do. So it's really understanding what the results we need and understand, and then achieving them. And how do we do this? With 5 activities on 3 levels, 3 flight levels. And the other really important piece is a systems architecture that glues all the agile islands together, connects all the silos, even agile silos, together. So that is what flight levels is in a nutshell. And let's talk about the 5 activities. So we'll start, the very first one is visualize the situation. So this should look very familiar to anyone that's looked at, that's worked in an agile team. This is Scrum teams do it, Kanban teams do it. But let's look at the different kinds of visualizations that that we can apply here. So all we're saying is visualize. We're not. There is no sort of prescribed way of doing that. So it can vary quite a bit. So let's look at a non-IT team. Flight levels is distinguished in that it works equally well. There's nothing IT specific about it. It works equally well across the entire organization. And it has to be, because it's designed for the entire organization: HR, legal, marketing, all that stuff. So here's an example from a sales team. It just so happens to be my company's sales team. But this is an old board, and you can see that our sales process is very well worked out. Like, sales, it's not rocket science, right? There's a sales funnel. You go and this happens to be government sales, and there's bids that are in progress that get submitted. You win some, you lose some. We want to analyze the ones that we've lost and see why did we lose them, all that kind of stuff. So it's a very sort of well understood process, very well established process. But we can have situations where it's not well established at all. There's a very high degree of uncertainty. So in those situations, one of the patterns that we sometimes use is called now, next, later. So this example right here, I know it's hard to read, but it's basically, it's a training company, I believe. And it's basically saying, well, there's a whole bunch of things we're working on now, and then there's a couple things that we can need to do next, and some things we need to get done by Chris. So it's basically adding a timeline there and just sort of tracking things over time. So it's the Kanban board provides a little bit better structure than just a to-do list, right? Because that's everything all together. But it's minimal structure because it's just a lot of uncertainty. Things are changing all the time. New tickets are coming in and tickets are changing, but it's still a visualization. So we have that. All right. So what's next? Well, we need to create focus. So what does that mean? And what are the different ways we could create focus? Well, there's a lot of different ways. If you're a Kanban coach, you may recognize WIP limits, or if you've been using Kanban. So work in process limits, work on fewer things, don't multitask all the time. But there's a lot of different ways of doing that. There's per person, there's a cap WIP, meaning that the whole team restricts the number of things they're working on to a certain maximum. There are time boxes. Scrum teams establish time boxes, 2 weeks. And that's a great way to focus the team. There's sequencing, we're going to do this first, and then when we're done with that, we'll do this. When we're done with that, we'll do that. We're not saying how long things will take, but we're just giving a sequence. There's start policies. There's capacity tokens, one of my favorites. There was a great presentation by one of my colleagues at Agile DC about that. So there's many different ways of creating focus. But the question is why? Well, traditional management focuses on resource utilization, making sure everyone's busy. The problem is that we have a situation much like this, this highway here. You can see that you don't have, if you're in a car on that road, how can you predict when you're going to be home? Now, of course, we have GPSs that do a pretty good job of that, but it's really hard to predict. And based on the time of day, the amount of time it takes you to get it home will change. We're very, very widely, right? So we've got unpredictability. We've got long cycle times. Now let's look at the opposite extreme. So we restrict it greatly. We let hardly anyone on the road. This is great, but we're not getting a lot of stuff done. So we have, we can focus, we can work on stuff, but we're not achieving as much as we could. So by balancing um, and being able to focus, we can optimize both the cycle time, and in here, everyone's getting home quickly, but we're also moving a lot of cars. So that's really the goal here. So, and there's multiple ways of doing that, like we said. So, um, all right. So, um, what is the third activity? It's establish agile interactions. So, um, why do we need to establish agile interactions? Well, even if we visualize everything, let's say we have boards all over our company. I actually used to work for a hedge fund in Midtown. And when I walked in, I was amazed that there were whiteboards everywhere with sticky notes all over the place in the CEO's office, in the hallways, everywhere. So we're visualizing everything, but it's meaningless unless people are talking. We need to make sure the right people talk about the right stuff at the right time. And this is across multiple teams, whether it's in the CEO's office, in the hallway, wherever it is. So how do we do that? Well, we have to establish these interactions. We don't use the word meeting, but essentially you're constructing these communication cadences across teams, across levels, and that is because these boards and tools only show us the situation, it's the humans that will actually make the improvements. And so you bring the right people at the right time to the right in front of the board, they can come up with the decisions that matter. So number 4, measure progress. So why do we measure progress? Well, we need a feedback loop. We need to measure what matters. So what are some of the kind of things that we would measure? Well, we should measure what we want to improve. So at the team level, here's a good example. This is actually from I believe it was a telecommunications project, and they established these metrics right up front. They said, we are aiming to reduce task time. So they basically measured some of the key tasks that people had to perform during the day using the system. And they had what they called chair swivels. I love this term. So because they were having to move from one system to the next, it was very inefficient because they had to do entry over here and then use another system over here. So they wanted to reduce chair swivels and have fewer clicks. So it's a really interesting way to essentially measure usability. So we say, oh, we can't measure usability, that's subjective, but actually there are ways of doing that. So there's a really interesting kind of set of measurements we can do at the team level. What about at the product level, the value stream level? What do we measure there? Well, some things we might measure, these are just examples, decreased time to market for a certain product, increased customer satisfaction. We want to improve the availability. Let's say we're running a service and it's going down all the time, it's failing. Well, we want to scale. There's lots of stories of, well, look at healthcare.gov, where lots of people signed up and, it was not able to scale up. So improve delivery predictability. So those are the kinds of things we might do at a product level or service level. What about at a higher level? What about the strategy level? What kinds of things will we measure there? What are those things that we need to measure? Well, here's some examples. Let's say we want to support the Android platform. We're addressing some new market. We want to reduce shrinkage by 50%. That's, if you're in retail, that's a big deal. There could be multiple strategies for doing that. That's an objective. Support the 100% remote workforce. This is quite relevant today. Launch major marketing campaigns or improve our benefits. So these are the kinds of things that would happen at a strategic level. And notice how these are not just IT; they're company-wide. So these are the kinds of things that we measure what matters for the whole company. So and finally, we need to improve. And what does that mean? Well, we're measuring, and we may make changes, small experiments, and we measure that and see if we improved or not. And so what we need to do is continue this process, and it's never ending. So we're never done. And it's not about making this huge, giant leap. It's really a set of small improvements that collectively get us where we need to go. So with and really this we illustrate this here. So it's not that you're going 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 4 5. No, it's really all of these things are occurring again and again. And so these things are great, but what would happen if we applied these 5 activities to, let's say, a team? We might end up with something that looks like this. So you can see we've applied these 5 activities and we've ended up with a board. Nice board. This happens to be for a Scrum team. So we've got a Scrum team here. They may have 2 boards. They may have this board and they may have a task board where to do, doing, done, and they're recording all of their tasks, right? So they might have more than one, but the point is that you've got this wonderful board here, and that's okay. But what's the point? How can this get us to business agility? Well, the key point is that we need to apply these 5 activities at multiple different flight levels all across our organization. And that's how we can achieve business agility and not just agile teams. So let's talk about how we do that. So first, so flight levels is a term from aviation. And the idea is that if you're flying very low to the ground, or let's say you're driving, you see a lot of details, right? You see all the cars and everything around you. You can see the neighborhood, but your vision is limited. I can't really see. If I'm in Manhattan, I can certainly not see what's happening in Brooklyn. Now, if I'm in a helicopter, I can very well see both Manhattan and Brooklyn. If I'm flying a jet, I can see at a very high level. I have a very wide view, but I don't see many details, right? So it's not about one level is better than the others. It's that they're different, and we need each of those level. We need to establish flight level systems at each of these levels. So let's talk about this first level. This is the team level. This is the people that are actually doing the work. Now, notice I don't say actually building the software, because that would just be an IT team. Of course, there are IT teams, but there are also underwriting teams, sales teams, HR teams. So this is the team level. These are the teams that are doing the work. Now, of course, we have more than one. So we call that flight level 1. That's the operational level. That's where the work is actually getting done. So we have multiple of those. Now, in constructing those teams, maybe we want to be a little smart about it and do some cross-functional things and try to minimize dependencies. That's all great. Nothing wrong with that. And in fact, one of my favorite references for how to do that is team topologies. It gives us great insight into the way to properly structure these teams so that they work, they work together effectively. That's great. But if I'm in a car in Manhattan and I need to make sure, or I'm in a truck and I'm going to make a delivery to Brooklyn, how do I know the situation in Brooklyn is ready for me? Imagine if I had a helicopter. Could I tell? Yes, it would be very easy to look at the situation. So this brings us to flight level 2. So that's the coordination level. That's a higher level view, a little bit less detail. We don't necessarily have to track everything that's going on in every team, but what we're doing is we are coordinating the efforts across team. And this is often called a value stream. This may be value streams, maybe products, that kind of stuff. But question, why doesn't flight level just call this value stream? Why aren't we just using the word value stream? Everyone's heard of value streams. Why aren't we saying that? Well, there's an important reason for that, and I want to explain it. So, of course, we may have multiple products in our organization, so we'll have multiple flight level 2 systems, right? And so each of those could be considered a value stream, and maybe each of those boards is an end-to-end, view of this value stream. So you have this value stream over here. This value. Now, what if there's interactions between the two? How could that happen? Well, imagine if you have multiple products in some sort of a product line. And when you introduce a new feature in one product, you really want to introduce it in the other product. Now, they may have completely different code bases, different technology, different everything. One is two different fighter jets, let's say, whatever it is. So we're modernizing two different fighter jets. Everything's different. But how can we do that? Well, we can do that by introducing another flight level 2 system. You see this system right in the middle here? What this is doing is coordinating across two different flight level 2 systems. And this is one of the reasons why we don't restrict ourselves to the word value stream, because flight level 2 can coordinate among value streams. And that's how you get kind of an operational portfolio. So you have value streams and coordination among value streams. So that's flight level 2. Okay, this is great. But what about if we were to fly a little bit higher, then we will be on flight level 3. And this is the strategic level. This is where we're in a plane. Now, we can't see much detail at all, but we can visualize our strategy, and we can help align the work in our organization to this strategy. And we make sure that we're focusing in the right areas, doing the things we need to do in order to achieve these strategic objectives, like the ones I talked about, right? Reducing shrinkage. It could be many, many different things going on, all to help achieve that objective. So we need to make sure, are we conducting controlled experiments to validate our hypotheses, right? So at the strategic level, it's not that we have a magic wand and we know, or we have a crystal ball and we know everything. We make hypotheses, we make bets, and we need to validate those. So at the flight level 3, what we're doing is we're coming up with a strategy, connecting that in, and sequencing what we're going to do. Okay, to reduce shrinkage, we're first going to do this, then this, then this, that kind of stuff. So that sort of sequencing will happen. So it's what we work on and when. So we talked about what things we can measure at that level. All right, so these are the flight levels. So how do we sort of link all of this together, right? There's a lot of different things here. There could be many different boards, like the situation I talked about at the hedge fund, where there were those were physical boards. Now you'd have it in a tool, but you have all these boards all around. How can we sort of connect and understand where we should be interacting? We do that with a work systems topology. So the work system topology is a representation. How a board is, it represents pieces of work, the flow of value. What we're doing here is going up one level, and instead of representing the value, we're representing the boards, the systems themselves. It's a system of systems. And so this is representing these systems. And you can see I'm using different colors to represent the flight level 1 systems and the flight level 2 systems, and finally flight level 3. Sometimes that's called a company wall or a strategy board, that kind of stuff. So the work system topology represents these systems and shows how they're connected. Now, does that mean when we're constructing one of these things, do we spend months and months and months and get a perfect topology? Absolutely not. So what we do is just a minimal amount of work to kind of understand the organization and see where we might need these systems and how maybe they should be connected. And this will evolve as we go. All right, so that's the work system topology. What else do we have? Well, we need to notice how these things are connected. Why are they connected? Well, they're connected when we need to talk, or when we need to flow work up or down. Information goes up, goes down, it goes both ways. So how do we do that? Well, it's the mechanism is called flight routes. So to explain flight routes, I want to give it a scenario. So here's a specific scenario at a company. This is a coaching that Klaus, this example is from Klaus Leopold. So here is an example of a flight level 3, a strategic board. So you can see that they're measuring strategic outcomes And what they've got is their themes, their strategic themes. You see each one of those is a swim lane. And for each one of those themes, they're saying, okay, here's what we're going to do in December, January, that kind of stuff, sort of by quarter kind of thing. A pretty typical portfolio Kanban, and with those outcomes, there's specific actions that we might want to take. So sometimes one method of doing this is called OKRA, objectives, key results, and actions. So the idea is you have the high-level objectives, you have key results that will, once you reach those, it says, okay, we have achieved that objective. And then there's specific actions, which could be experiments, right? We don't know that these actions will produce the result. We're trying them. So these are all the initiatives, the high-level initiatives that we are proposing in order to achieve these outcomes. So this is the company wall. And so what comes next? Well, we have a flight level 2 board where we're coordinating among teams. So you can see, I'll just sort of trace what's going on here. We have these feature canvases. So the canvas is like a mini business case, right? Where we're saying, well, we think this is going to do this, and here's the hypothesis, and here's how we're going to measure it, and here's the risks and that kind of stuff. So that's a pretty typical approach, is to have these canvases. And you can see that we're flowing, those canvases still have a kind of a workflow that they go through, which is there's a backlog, we're validating things, and then validated ideas. So this is where we're validating our ideas. So this is upstream, right? This is where we're working with analysts and UX, human factors engineers, that kind of stuff. Then we have the initial outcomes. 5P is the name of the product. So we have these outcomes, and then we're breaking them down into epics. And the epics are the things that will be worked on by one or more teams. So these epics are what we need to do to achieve the goals for this product. So this flight level 2 is for a specific product. So what is a flight route? A flight route is when we trace the flow of work from a trigger all the way to through multiple flight levels, multiple boards, multiple systems within this topology. So here we have a new feature idea that came at the product level, right? Is it related to an existing strategy? Like, are we in line with the company strategy? Maybe, maybe not, right? This is just a product designer, right? The product manager, they're coming up with ideas. So they most likely, yes, but it depends. So we fill out this canvas, we create some expected outcomes, and then notice this line here is dotted. See this line here up here? This is a copy. So imagine if each of these, and I have actually examples, we don't have time to go into them today, but I have examples in real tools where I've done this kind of thing, where you basically have a card on one level in one Kanban, in one flight level system, and you copy it to the other system, so you're representing that idea in two places. And that's how you make these linkages, right? So one particular tool, that's one of my favorites, has a feature called mirror. And then when you mirror something, you basically have a card and you click on it and say, mirror this card, and it makes a copy of that card in another board. So there are multiple ways of doing this. You can do it by hand, But the point is that some of these tools lately have the really, really slick ways of doing this. So we bring it up to the strategy level and we validate that strategy. When are we going to achieve this? How does it fit? Is it part of the strategy? Do we need to adjust the strategy? Right? Maybe there's a new strategy that this represents a breakthrough that nobody even realized before. Oh my God, we need to update the strategy. So there's important feedback there. And once we do that, we then create an initiative or update an existing initiative. And then that initiative comes back down. And once we've validated that, it's all in line, everything's aligned, everything's good, we come down and we can create our epics. So you see that how that flow of value, flow of work actually goes across flight levels. And that's how you get the right people involved at the right time and can make these important decisions. So what happens then? Well, once you've got these feature ideas, I left off the top level because it's getting too busy. We come down, we've got these epics, and then we can pass these epics down. Again, it's a copy, right, to the team level. And the team can break down these epics into their stories, maybe features, whatever it is, and they can work on them. So there may, for a given epic, you may have one team working on it, you might have multiple teams, maybe a whole art agile release train if it's a safe set of teams, could be a Kanban team, could any number of things. The point is that this is how we have this work, and we're connecting it in. Now, what have we done here? What pattern is this? So if what's really interesting is if you simplify these boards and just put them as colors, as just bands here. So you see the top band is a flight level 3, the middle band represents flight level 2, and the bottom band represents flight level 1. Now remember, each of those could be multiple boards, multiple instances, but we're just talking about the level. And that's why it's useful to think of these things as levels. So we can trace the flow of work in this example, only this example, that it started at, it got triggered at flight level 2, went up to flight level 1, and then flight level 3, and then went down to flight level 1. And if we trace that, and if we further simplify that and just see what that pattern looks like, we will see what looks like a heartbeat. And what's really, really fascinating is that Klaus has created a pattern, a set of patterns that where you can see these heartbeats that trace where new ideas are triggered and how they flow through the flight level system. So you see here is kind of a very traditional, strategy. We've come up with a strategy. We decompose that. We pass it down to in the product, and then at the product level, we decompose that and pass down work to the teams. This is top down, right? Well, is that the only way that work flows through the organization? Absolutely not. Here's another one. Here is work that was discovered at the team level, maybe a graphic designer, and it just goes straight on through. Maybe there's no, it's existing work. We've already done the analysis at the product level. It doesn't need to go up. There's no coordination. A single team can handle it. There are no dependencies. This is a wonderful thing for a team, right? When this happens, it's great. What about this one? Here is where a new idea was conceived at the team level, and we realize that this has implications all the way up to the strategy level. And this is where amazing new ideas can happen. So in a SAFe team, for example, you have the innovation and planning sprint, right? The last sprint of a PI. New ideas happen during that time. I worked at HBO for a while, and during those weeks, some people would work on all kinds of projects, and some of these things actually became products. They became brand new products for the company. So ideas spring up from everywhere, and they have implications all the way up to corporate strategy. So this is showing that route of work all the way from the team level all the way up to the strategic level, and making sure. And so if you have, what we're doing is we're observing the flow of work. We're observing how work is flowing today, and we know that work may flow differently, as it's sort of the what's the Heisenberg principle, that as you measure something, it changes. But what this allows you to do is understand how work is flowing. And when we understand this, we can make sure that we have the right people talking. So if we see something like this, we better make sure that there's some representatives at the team level looking at that company wall, looking at that strategy, and having those discussions. Really interesting stuff. So here's another one. We started in the middle, went to the. So the point is, there's a lot of different flight routes. There's really a pattern language there. And so in summary, what we've got with flight levels is 5 activities at 3 flight levels, a system architecture that glues all the agile islands together and ensures that the right people are talking at the right time, regardless of, what their title is or where they're working. So that's how Flight Levels works. So in the few minutes I have left, I want to zip through the rest, and we will hopefully have a couple minutes for questions. So very brief historical background. Klaus Leopold invented Flight Levels. Here's 3 books. The most recent book I recommend to everyone is called Rethinking Agile. Brilliant book, very easy to read. I recommend it. So when was Flight Levels introduced? Well, you can see that it basically came, it's not exact, but it basically came about in 2015. So you can see that it's kind of right in there with all these different scaling approaches. That's when it was introduced. And there's been a lot of growth, significant market penetration in Europe. The number of coaches is growing exponentially. Number of guides, meaning the trainers, are growing rapidly. And the first USA-based courses by me and Klaus Leopold are scheduled for early 2023. So how can you learn more? Well, first of all, I wanted to have a little something here, a little shout out to some of the coaches who might be looking at watching this. So I wanted to explain in a nutshell, what are the unique innovations and the incredible insights that are represented by Flight Levels. This is something new. It's not just a rehash of things from other methods, agile methods. There's really some new fundamental innovations and insights here. So I tried to summarize them here. And of course, every one of these could be an hour talk all by itself. So we won't go into any of them, but I wanted to show this so that you could, just to be aware as a coach that there's a lot to chew on here. This will keep you full for a long time. So additional coaching tools that I use. What do I use with Flight Levels? What do I like to work with Flight Levels? And let me explain really briefly. There was a time in my life when I learned to drive a motorcycle. I wanted to learn how to ride a motorcycle. And I got my license, and I observed something fascinating, that after I learned how to ride a motorcycle, it made me a better car driver, because I had an additional perspective that I didn't have before. I was much more aware of stuff. So these things, I think, work very, very well together. And one of them is the Kanban maturity model. Now, why does this work well? Because the Kanban maturity model, all it says is, don't run a marathon your first day of training. All it's saying is, so for example, how does it apply to Flight Levels? Well, if we're designing a Flight Level 3 system, and this is the first time we've ever done a visualization, let's not create the uber amazing, super complicated visuals. Let's just get something really simple. It could be to do, doing, done. It could be that simple. Let's start with something simple, and we can evolve it over time. That's what the Kanban maturity model is saying. That's all. So it's a really nice addition, because otherwise, could Flight Levels fail? Of course it could. If you give people tools that are way too, if you try to get them to run a marathon the first day of training, that's not going to go too well. Finally, the Discovery Kanban. It's very interesting insights there about managing the upstream work and effective triage. I think a lot of people know about that. Okaloa. I love Okaloa. Just incredible learning simulations, and really getting a deep, deep understanding of the flow of work in a single system. So that helps us understand a single system, Flight Levels helps us connect those systems together. Beautiful combination. And finally, agenda shift. Because we're talking about Flight Level 3, right? We're talking about strategy. Well, what if we don't have a strategy? Agenda shifts helps us codify the strategy and clarify what our desirable outcomes are. It's really interesting stuff that you can apply at the strategic level. So doing a deep dive, if you want a really deep dive, there are upcoming meetups here, and I've got I won't go into them, but you can read them here. There are live YouTube sessions every 2 weeks. Flight Club, awesome name. First rule about Flight Club, you must talk about Flight Club. And of course, I will be co-teaching masterclasses with Klaus in January, February, and March for Flight Level 2, Flight Level 3, and Flight Level System Architecture. And that is the presentation. So thank you very, very much. And I hope we have a minute or two for questions.
Thank you, Craig, for your presentation and these all valuable information. I'm sure that everyone will learn a lot from your presentation and message. Sorry for the technical issues at the beginning, which happened, but still. There are some issues in the background. But we are recording the session, so we will publish this as soon as possible. I have some questions for you while we have some couple of minutes more. So we're talking about the mapping the flow, but we are not talking about the reorganizing, right? I mean the hierarchical levels.
That's right.
What do you think about this?
He's exactly right. Yeah, there's a misunderstanding. You wouldn't want to look at the flight levels and say, oh, well, these are the teams and these are the executives and these are the middle managers. Not the case at all. The Klaus makes the point that the people who are working on the teams will create level 1 systems, but they'll also create level 2 systems when they need to coordinate with each other. And also the strategy may, at the strategy level, really the companies that really what you want is what the problem that companies have is not that is that people don't know what the strategy is. They're not aligned to it necessarily, not because they want to go off in a different direction, because they may not even know. So actually having that strategy out there and visible and everyone seeing it and the right people talking about the strategy on a regular basis, it's incredible value there. And so that's so it's not a we're not mapping the org chart, not at all.
Yeah,
SAFe has something like this.
Mm-hmm.
SAFe does have
Mm-hmm.
something like this. The Scaled Agile Framework calls this the dual operating system. And that came from John Kotter. So John Kotter's approach he talks about a dual operating system where you have the organizational chart on one side, but you've got the actual flow of work on the other side. So one is a top-down taxonomy, and the other is a network. And so it's interesting that they talk about that, they recognize that, but they don't really give you the tools to kind of really handle that in the same way, in an elegant way that Flight Levels does.
Yeah, you're right. So before we close, what kind of recommendation that you have for the audience for taking away from this session? Maybe 3 things. Yeah.
Well, okay. So I think if you're a reader and you love to read, definitely, I hands down recommend that book, Rethinking Agile. It's a masterpiece. Klaus, the third book is the best. It's very, very engaging, lots of illustrations, and it's just a super. But if you're not a book reader, or even if you are, there is an introductory course, and it's online, and it's called Flight Level Introduction, or FLIN. So FLIN, and it's completely online. You can take it at your own pace, and the point of this course, it's just a few hour course. There's a number of workshops in it or exercises. So if you take all the exercises, you do all of them, it could be a few hours. Otherwise, you could zip through it in an hour. But we recommend that you do go through the exercises. And the point of this course is to understand, is Flight Levels for me? Can Flight Levels be applied? Will it work well, or has a potential to work well in our organization? So that's the point of FLIN. And other than that, I guess the third one would be meetups, Flight Club, the XP and Agile meetup. These are great ways to get started. And that's help you decide if you want to go for a deeper dive for those master classes.
So reading more, watching more, listening more, and questioning more, right? So these are the key things for everyone. Thank you so much for all these inputs and comments, for your presentation. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Um,
My pleasure.
yeah. So hope to see you again soon. Thank you.
Awesome.